So first of all, welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us at this webinar. Personally, it is a long time I'm not doing a webinar, so maybe I will have some issue, but I hope for your understanding. So people are coming in again, so but I think we can start with a short and general presentation about today's subject. Today we will touch, as you know, GMI is a company who is focused in safety, mainly intrinsic safety and functional safety. On the other hand, there is another aspect which is touching also GMI more and more, and it is security. So today we will go through a webinar together with Tino. I will present him a little bit later, and we will touch these both subject, and we will see how there are interaction between safety and security. Before to do that, just let me shortly present the two speakers. One step back. One is myself, Mauro Perego. I'm sales director for GMI, an Italian company with subsidiaries and offices around the world. We will touch later on lightly the subject of GMI, and today we have our Tino van de Kapel, our director for functional safety director, working with us since many years. Tino is also our trainer for our functional safety training program. I'm not going through too much because we will touch the subject later. Yeah, the company. Just very shortly before to jump into the subject, who is GMI? GMI is an Italian company who's producing engineering field interface. As I said before, we touch two important aspects, which are the intrinsic safety and functional safety aspect, and almost all our equipment are either suitable for intrinsic safety or functional safety, or even both of them. Where our devices are used mainly in automation packages like the ICS, ESD, fire and gas, and so on. And we are on main industrial sector like oil and gas, chemical, petrochemical, food and beverage, and pharmaceutical, for example. Wherever there is safety, in somehow our equipment are part of them, of that. GMI has a 40-year experience in this sector. We have all production here in Italy. However, we are offices and subsidiary around the world. So we are present all around the world. Here, just some numbers about the offices we have, location with our partners like distributor. And we have also indication of, we will touch the subject later, the number of functional safety training or training in cybersecurity we arrange worldwide together with the support of Tino. Okay, of course, again, about GMI, we do everything here in-house, and whatever it is produced here in-house is 100% tested, you know, by dealing with safety. That means life of people, environment, and assets of a company. The quality of the product is really very important. That's why finally we provide, we are so confident about our product that we provide even 5 years warranty on each single piece. Certification, this is really important to prove and to verify the quality of the product. As well, it is important to know that we have almost all local certificates which allow our customer and partners to use our equipment worldwide. So you see on this picture, we have a lot of symbols representing most of the local certification which are today required to install equipment. This is a short overview of the portfolio. We range from intrinsic safe barrier to isolator to safety relays, passing through power supply systems, as well as multiplexer, hard multiplexer, surge protectors, and we have also in the bullet of termination board, we want to represent also our capability to engineer and to adapt our product to specific requirement of DCS, ESD system. So we have the possibility to install our modules on a termination board and connect directly that to the designed system, which is used in the plant. The last bullet is not a component, it is not material, it is our services that we provide to market. I'm talking about consultancies, I'm talking about training. So we do training in intrinsic safety and in functional safety. We have actually a program which is running together with, in the name of TUV. We are partner of TUV, and we do this training. Tino later on will give you some little bit more information. In few words, the participation to this training and being successful in passing the exam will give to the participant a certificate which qualifies the person as a functional safety engineer. We will see later also importance of this. This is in short a list of importance account that we have. So we deal with different kind of accounts like system vendors, EPC contractors, as well as OEM, and of course end user worldwide. You will receive a copy of this PDF presentation that we are running. You will have also the possibility to raise question. There is the specific button, question and answer question button if you want to raise a question during the webinar. I will very soon I will leave the speech to Tino, but I will monitor, I will be here, and if there is any question, I will interrupt Tino, asking him to answer to the doubt that you may have during the presentation. Last thing, just I want to say, we will have the possibility, or we will load this presentation, which is under recording at the moment, and with this presentation together all the other webinar we have done in the past and we will do in the future on different subjects will be available on GMI YouTube channel. So hopefully I didn't forget anything, Tino, and I will give you the speech now and give you the chance to. Oh, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
I think you can take the control right now.
Yeah, I think you have to release the control, but it doesn't matter to me. Okay, all right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are based in the world. As Mauro was saying, my name is Tino. I've been in the business for quite some years, mainly out of the safety environment or the functional safety environment. Thank you, Mauro, and GMI for giving us the other opportunity, or another opportunity again, to share some of the know-how with the people around the world. Topic for today is no safety without security, and equally, you cannot achieve security without safety. So somehow we will have to work hand in hand together in able to achieve a safe operations in the process industry, as also to maintain a kind of security on those type of systems. Okay, so this is the first slide that I want to jump into based on the IEC 61511. For those of you who do not know what this standard means, the IEC 61511 is the functional safety standard when you want to design, operate, and maintain a safety instrumented system, enabled to keep your process industry to a safe state if it is required so. In other words, the process industries has been expanded in the edition 2 with 2 new type of applications. The classical oil and gas, chemical, petrochemicals remained in the edition 2. They added by in the edition 2, coming from edition 1, but new by edition 2 was the pharmaceutical and the food and beverage. The topic for today is talking something about security, and that will only be found in the standard in that phase number 1, which is the top box here on that life cycle model. And box number 1 will say you have or you shall carry out a security risk assessment as part of your hazard and risk assessment on your installation. So if you would go into chapter 8, which is also seen here as clause number 8, which is your phase number 1 activity, that is where the standard edition 2 in 2016, when it was newly released as edition 2, it was saying you shall carry out security risk assessment. Based on experience over the last 5 to 6 years, we do know that this is not an easy task to do, because the standard is clearly saying you shall carry out a security risk assessment. As with many other things, they say you shall do a lot, but they don't tell you how to do it. So part of this presentation or part of this webinar, the purpose of this webinar is to share as much as possible hints and tips, including links to some documents where you can find some additional material on how you can start with your security risk assessment. In the standard, security risk assessment shall be carried out. They are referring to 3 documents, as I have updated here the left bottom document, which is this one over here. That's the report number 9. For those specialists listening into this webinar now today, you would say, well, the standard is referring to 2013, which was correct. And the reason for that was when 2016 edition 2 came out of the 61511, obviously, 2017 of report 9 was not being released yet, but today, the only valid document is the 2017 release, report number 9 of the ISA technical report of the 84 committee. And if you look at the title over here, you will recognize they give you a combination of 2 items. One is the IEC 61511 in combination with the IEC 62443. And that document will give you some guidance on how to do cybersecurity related to the functional safety lifecycle. The second document that they refer to is like a wide range of, let's say, more than 40 plus different parts of the 27000 series. And I call this the IT security standards. And in this IT security standard, it's all about how to manage your system. And one document they refer to here is a 27001, which came out in 2013, has been receiving a corrigendum in 2014 and in 2015. And the majority of the projects that we are actually doing over the last 5 to 6 years, the majority are focusing on the OT security standard, which is the 62443, which I got some slides that I prepared here in the webinar that actually came from the ISA 99. So the original document was called the ISA 99 back in the US. Now this document has been, or let's say the standard itself, has been transferred into a much larger document, which has 4 different clusters, 14 different parts. Unfortunately, as of today, not all parts have been released. So this standard is still under kind of review, is still under kind of development, although it's still not totally released yet. This is one of it becoming more and more the de facto standard if you want to do security risk assessments. Before we start, I want to, I just got a question in already, Mauro. I don't know if you see it coming in, or I don't know if you can see the questions. What will take the precedence while executing the projects, ICS Cyber Security or SIS? Well, I hope that this participant that is asking the question will, after the webinar, not have to ask this question again, because clearly both of them are equally important. You cannot achieve a SIS, let's say, trusty safety system if you have not taken care about your security. Opposite, you will not achieve security if you not have a reliable safety instrumented system. So I will click type answer live. So this is done.
Yes.
Right. Before we start, just to open the mind, I got some information out of an older report. I downloaded a couple of weeks ago the new report 2022. So it's 10 years that I'm downloading every year this WEF Global Risk Report. And as with many things in the industry, it's a never-ending story. And I think security threats in our, let's say, process industry are getting more and more and more a real issue that people hopefully will not have to experience themselves. But I can tell you that this is becoming a real hot topic enabled to, let's say, try to protect you from. Rule number 1. Any device, regardless how fancy, how complex, or how simple that device is in your process industry that is containing some software, well, that unit, that interface, that hardware unit with some firmware in can be actually tricked with different firmware to do different things than the initial purpose was. I give you a very simple example. Somewhere in, I think it was in 2010, that's now, in the meantime, that's 12 years ago, there was a SIS system, a world-leading SIS system manufacturer has been reprogrammed by some, let's say, bad intention. It has been reprogrammed to do different things than the initial purpose was, causing damage, mechanical damage on the nuclear enrichment plants in Iran. And yes, I'm talking here about the famous or the infamous Stuxnet virus. In other words, doesn't matter what system you are using, people with another intention can reprogram that if they really have access to it, and they can have your system functionality changing what the initial purpose was. Credit is given here to my, let's say, friend and colleague called Stephen Smith. He's an American fellow based out of Belgium who is doing some security risk assessment. One of them was on all the nuclear power plants that they have here in Belgium. But I picked his brain on this one. So thanks you again to Stephen for that. The second rule is any device that is connected to a kind of a network. And the network doesn't really matter. The network can be purely normal, let's say your Ethernet, or it can be your Modbus, or it can be your wireless. It can even be a safety bus. But if there is a device connected to somehow a network, it can be compromised by an external party, regardless how good you think your countermeasurements or firewalls are. So, simply speaking, a fancy or not fancy old relay cabinet with no communication will not be hacked through a network because there is no network communication to it. So if you would be able to use solid state logic solvers as they are still on the market with no communication, well, it's humble to say that those are probably very secure for not being hacked through communication because there are no means of communication in such type of platforms. And rule number 3, that's again coming from Stephen. Actually, the source was from Bruce Nair. The user is going to pick the dancing pigs over security every time. To explain this simple, and I have seen some demonstrations for that, which is actually quite hilarious if you see that. When you put a target on a screen, say, do not click here, how many engineers you think you will meet that will first click on the one they're not supposed to click? In other words, they always try to find the easy way out. And that is another thing that clearly cybersecurity threats and countermeasures will be purely defeated on human interaction, not following what they are supposed to follow. Right, to start a little bit more into details about the topic for today, we want to differentiate here between the risk in safety business with the risk in security. For those, and I can see here there are a few of my, let's say, former students of my SIS training course listening in today. If you remember the definition of risk in our safety course, it's always your consequence times your frequency. And that will be defined in the moment you know what type of consequence you can have, both on either a human injury or maybe your environment or your capital investment or your economic loss. That is more the straightforward, let's say, thinking pattern that people can easily follow. But we always debate, and we never agree typically, how frequent this can happen. That is the challenge for a safety definition. For a security definition, it's quite similar. When you look at the security risk definition, it's about the potential threat. That can be any indication, any circumstance that can lead into a certain damage. And then we need to find what are the weaknesses, the vulnerability of the weakness that can be actually in your systems. Again, we're not only talking here about cybersecurity. That's also part of the reason why we have done this webinar here today, or will do this webinar. We also want to underline the importance of the OT security, which is your operational technology. Simply speaking, like who has access to your critical infrastructure, who have access to your documents, to your files, etc., etc. So that is coming on top of all the instrumental protection or instrumentation protection that you may have used in able to bring your, let's say, production into a safe state. Some of the definitions which I have used here is called the ICS, which some people, of course, already know, which is a very common definition for industrial automation and control system. And inside such an industrial automation control system, part of it will be, of course, your BPCS or your process, your basic process control system, which we used to call it in the old engineering days. We used to call this a DCS. The other part will be your safety instrumented system or your SIS. Another thing that I would like to highlight here before we start really to go more in detail is the mindset. An IT person and an OT, let's say security person, they have completely different mindset. If that has to be done by one person, well, then that one person will have a challenge. Because for the IT people, that's here on the left column, you can see that the top priority, it's all about the confidentiality of the data that they will have to handle. That is their prior, let's say, focus that they will have if they focus for the IT, the informational technology security. Whereas the OT security person or the operational technology security investment, it's all about how available can I keep my system? How available can I keep my production? Because end of the day, in able to please the management, it's all about your turnover versus your margin or benefits that this production facilities can make. So one of them, the IT, is confidentiality. The other one, the OT, it's all about the availability. Going a bit more in details now, and I already mentioned that in my introduction, the IEC 61511 is clearly saying that we need to carry out, you shall carry out security risk assessment, and they refer very easy to 3 documents. However, if you have no access to those documents, you will struggle because those documents are giving you a bit of guidance on how to start, what to focus on, and they give you even some examples. Later on in this webinar, I additionally on those 3 documents, I found some, let's say, public domain available documents, which may help you also enable to do that security risk assessment exercise. Report number 9 has been reviewed. It came from 2013, review 2017, and it's specifically for the SIS, your Safety Instrumented System Cybersecurity Risk Assessment Procedure, We call that in our SIS lifecycle, we call this the PHA, which is the process hazard assessment, or the cyber process hazard assessment. The functional safety standard for the leading standard today for the process industry is called the IEC. Back in the States, they called this the ISA 61511. Mind you that back in the States, it took them 2 additional years to adopt to our European IEC 61511. They adopted it to the ISA 61511 in October 2018. Now, together with the functional safety leading standard, they refer in this document, report 9, also to the IEC 62443, which I told you is gaining very rapidly let's say, the status that the people will only use the 62443 to do those security risk assessments. The link to the PHA step in the cybersecurity process to review the output of your process hazard assessment to find out, to identify what is your worst case in terms of the position of the plant, in terms of the worst case to the safety of the plant, in terms of security, and of course also in terms of your environment consequences for that production unit. And then you will have to identify which hazardous scenarios potentially have you recognized or could potentially come in that could initiate an event and could have a potential barrier or potential layer that could be hackable or that could be vulnerable or weak in a design that people with some different intention could do something. The second reference document from the IEC 61511 is that IEC 27000 series. As already mentioned, I call this the IT security. It's actually a security management system. It's a family of parts of the 27000, and the one they refer to in the IEC 61511 is the second one over here. It's about the requirements for your security risk management. And the third one, and I want to spend a bit more time on this one, as this is the one that I mentioned is more and more used worldwide now, is the IEC 62443 that came out originally from the ISA 99. Already mentioned it also. Well, you can recognize here 4 different colors, which are the 4 clusters. I call them the clusters in the standard. Cluster number 1 is the general cluster. And I have an extra slide coming up to explain a little bit more what is the intention of all those different parts which you see over here. The one with a symbol here of a bulb means that it's still under development. It's not been released yet. We are still waiting here for part number 4 of cluster number 1, which will contain the life cycle. And although it's not has been released, I already took a copy out of the draft to show you here potentially a life cycle phase also in the IEC 62443. So we have the general cluster, we have the policies, procedures, system, and components. As I mentioned, I have prepared some extra slides. The source again is on the bottom of the slides. So as Mauro has said before, as you have logged into this webinar, you will receive from GMI the PDF version of this webinar, including the slides, the copy of the slides, and you should be able here to click or even copy that link and able to see where does this information come from. Background, the 62443, again, that came from the isa99.org. The committee itself is run by the ISA committee today, but it is the IEC back in Switzerland who is releasing the document. That means that this is the first time in history, towards my experience, that we see an ISA committee and an IEC, let's say, standard working together one by one, that we have the same documentation now that we can refer to. So the general organization cluster has actually 4 different parts. I got a person saying, sorry, I cannot see the presentation anymore, Mauro, but this did not come into the Q&A. I do not know why. Can you still see the presentation, Mauro? Can you put your thumb up?
I can still see the presentation. Strange.
Okay. Right. maybe lost or did something different. Anyhow, so the general cluster have 4 parts. We have part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in the general part 1 is actually the framework. It is the framework of the, let's say, standard. It will explain you what is the purpose of the standard. In part number 2 is nothing more than, again, that's your abbreviation, your terms and definitions. That's the same as in every standard of the IEC. There's always a section in there that will explain you what terminology will the standard use. In part number 3, if it will be out, because that's not out yet, that will give you some guidance on the security conformance metrics. In other words, how can you measure the performance of your countermeasurements. And then part number 4 will be the life cycle. As I said, the life cycle has not been released yet, although you'll recognize later on in the webinar, it's coming out of the IEC SIG 1511. They actually copied it and they replaced the word safety with security. That's most likely how they started. Cluster number 2 is more the policies and the procedures, more like the management information. Like in part number 1 of cluster 2, it's specific for the IACS, Industrial Automation Control System, end users or asset owners. It will give you some requirements that you should understand and fulfill. In part number 2, it will give you the different security levels. We will call them the SL levels. And later on, I will show you we have 4 SLs left. In part number 3, they will explain you the importance of the patch management. As you can most likely understand, the patch management on your firmware driving your plant today is also a quite important issue for security. Then part number 4 is specific for the service providers on those type of systems, some specific requirements. And part number 5 has not been released yet. That came out or that has been defined. The title of the part 5 has been defined in the summer of 2020 by memory. That's the implementation guidance for the IACS asset owners. That means that will be for the end users. Then for all the system integrators, system manufacturers listening into this webinar, or the end users combining equipment together, well, that is here the cluster number 3. That is cluster number 3 is the system definitions. You will have the security technologies for the overall system. You will have specific security risk assessment and system design. That is the newest part by memory that has been released in 2020. And I think I got an extra slide on that. And then you have part number 3, which will give you the security requirements and the security level on your system level. Part number, or cluster number 4 has 2 parts. I call this more the specific vendor related parts of the standard. That's for security product development for hardware as well as for software, as well as here we have the technical security requirements for any component that you may use. There are 4 levels left. There used to be 5. We used to also define SL0 in the initial release of the 62443 that has been revised, because SL0 would have said you do not need any counter measurements to achieve that. In other words, there is no much to talk about. SL1, to give you a small hint and a small advice, all the safety PLC manufacturers that you may use until today achieve maximum SL1. That means those systems, like a safety PLC that you may use, are protected against any casual or coincidental violation. But they are not protected against an SL2, which is saying intentional violation. So if someone really has the intention to hack into your safety PLC infrastructure, those systems today have not been prepared for that. That is at least what the industry has learned us in the last 4 to 5 years, as all those safety PLC manufacturers also claim a certain security level. Here you have 4 levels. The higher the level, of course, the more countermeasurements you will have to foresee in that. And they have been broken down into target, achieved, and capability. But again, I will not go too much in detail looking at time clock, as I don't want to overrun as I usually do. Zones and conduits. The zones and conduits, I took a picture, which is a very clean architecture, which is not achievable anymore in the real world out there in the industry, since most people have mixed all kinds of systems with all kinds of communication cables. There are even vendors where you put control and safety into one platform. So that's certainly not their system here on this picture. But mind you that you would have a safety implemented system totally isolated from your control system. Well, that would be, of course, the ultimate solution to try to make your SIS more secure than if you have all kinds of communication going in and out. The zones can be, for instance, your complete plant. It can be your plant demilitarized zone. It can be your control center, means your control room. It could be a BPCS, can also be a production unit. And in between the zones, we have here the green symbol here that is shown for the channels or the conduits. And as a word of advice, you can make your zones with a counter measurement. You can have a security level on a zone. You cannot have a security level on a channel. Right. Mauro, time for the first poll question to see how many people are still following.
Yes. Let's...
Which cluster in the IC 62443? So I showed you cluster 1, 2, 3, 4. Which cluster of that standard covers the system-wide requirements? Was this cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, or cluster 4? And please give us some clicks. There is no prize to win. There is no face to lose, because we will not mention the name who clicked here already on the wrong buttons. I know it's a bit of a tricky question. That is why we are doing this poll question, to see how much interaction we can achieve. I still need 2 more clicks, otherwise I go and strike. I don't want to continue if people don't give me a click.
Okay, let's wait again.
For 2 more clicks, Mauro.
Okay, one is gone. Another one.
One is done. Okay,
here
thank you. Okay.
Very good. So let's stop it.
Yeah, you can.
And I share it.
Well, it's a bit it's a bit scary that only, let's say, 30% of the people listening into this webinar have really listened. The rest are all clicking on their own cluster. As I said, there is no prize to win or to lose here, but cluster 1 is nothing to do with the system-wide requirements. It's all about the general framework and the general information of the standard. That cluster 2 is more about the management of that system. We are really after here cluster number 3, which should be for any end user, any system engineer, any system integrator in here in that webinar. That is the part or the cluster that you will have to focus on. And of course, cluster number 4, that was for the manufacturers of such products. Unless there is a manufacturer in this group, then it would be cluster 4 that you have to focus on. All right, Mauro, I will stop sharing and I will continue as the clock is ticking. That's the life cycle. Again, if you blink your eyes and you would see the 6.15.11 life cycle, they look very similar. Actually, they are very similar. You start here on the top with a high-level cyber risk assessment, meaning that in the brainstorming with any client, we will talk about what type of security level you believe you can achieve here on your plan. We will need to have a digital, let's say, printout, layout, footprint of your plant, and we will start to define and decide which section will be a zone and which zone is communicating with the other zone. That, in other words, we need to identify in phase number 2 the allocation of all the zones and all the conduits. Once we have this visualized, then we have to think about with a detailed cyber risk assessment. In other words, we will have to do with a specialist some penetration in that type of systems, and we will have to prove, did you achieve your required security level, yes or no? In case you have not achieved your security level, which you were hoping to achieve, well, then we have to come up with a solution. Of course, that is very, let's say, challenging, because here we have to find on the market with what type of, let's say, counter measurements can we achieve that. In other words, we first have to specify in the requirement specification here in phase number 4, and then we have to seek on the market solutions. I gave you a very simple example that hopefully you will also simply understand. If you do communication, it's the same like you put a one-way valve in a pipeline. We put a one-way data diet in a communication, meaning you can only communicate from this side to the other side. There is no potential communication coming back. That's a very simple example of a potential countermeasurement. Of course, we can also have some other means of risk reduction. In other words, we may have a specific access to our control systems that we can make more secure. That's one of the items. We can have multiple, let's say, ways on how to test your security settings enabled to access one of the items or a cabinet or a document, etc. We have to install, commission, and do all the countermeasurements together. And then finally, the end user needs to do something. In other words, the end user will have to maintain and prove how efficient those countermeasurements are actually working on site. And of course, if there would be a problem, then there will be a response and a recovery plan enabled to recover from whatever hack attack that you may have suffered from. All of that must be managed. It's again all about training, about competency, and of course, it's all about assessments and audits. I took here the freedom to take I still call it myself a very good document. It's a reference coming from a company called AE Solutions, where John Cusimano is still one of the managers working in that company. He's also, John Cusimano is one of the main persons after this part here, part 2 of cluster 3 of the 62443. And John, together with Tim, has written here a white paper, a document, which I'm giving you here the link for. And I took a picture out of this document, and you can see here the 5 steps how you potentially can start with doing a security risk assessment. As time is ticking away, I'm looking at my clock, Mauro, so I'm trying to keep my time this time. Yeah. You start with document, that is document the system. You will have to do some assessments on all your weak items in your networks, endpoints, physical, etc. You will do a partition on your physical systems, and that is where you come in here with your risk assessment workshop. So typically in the workshop, we start to find out how little that the end users start to understand, and that's basically followed then with one of our trainings additionally to help them to understand better what risk assessment they can do. If, however, you have the know-how and you can do your risk assessment workshop yourself, that is where you will come up with some mitigation and counter measurements. Right, I will go a bit more quicker than I was expecting to do on those documents. Additional guidance, which I really would recommend. Number 1 is this G108 is coming from DNV. That's the document from September 2017. It's free, available on the internet, which was actually resulting from a joint industry consortium of companies like ABB, DNV, Emerson, Honeywell, Kongsberg, London, Petroleum Safety Authority, Shell, Siemens, Statoil, and Woodside Energy all together. They put their brains together and they bring a practical guidance for clearly the offshore industry back in Scandinavian area on how to start with doing this type of work. Maybe before you start, I would highly recommend to look on those top 10 pitfalls which they have found. And I can go through every single one of them and give you some examples. But again, I'm running out of time here, unfortunately. But if you read those 10, I'm pretty sure that some of them may be already a challenge or a struggle for yourself. Number 2 document is the Operational Guide 86, which is coming from the HSE from United Kingdom, which is already in the edition 2. That's a document similar to the ones from DNV, but with a different mindset, a different approach on how you can do your security risk assessment. And last but not least, for any chemical, let's say, end user or engineer or interested engineer in this webinar, well, there you can go to the Namur workgroup. That's namur.net. There is again a web link over here. That's the only one that is not free of charge. That is the one against payment. If, of course, you belong to this Namur, let's say, end users group association, well, then you should have access to those 4 documents. One is called the here the worksheets. The other ones are called the, I forgot myself now, apologize. One is called the recommendation, sorry. The other one is called the worksheets. So you have here the NA 135, and I think I was referring here in my document to the NA 169, which is for the process industry building a safety instrumented system. If you want to have some more guidance, please feel free to search and Google some of those. I'm pretty sure that most of them will be having a lot and tons of information, so you will be overwhelmed with kind of information that you could find on the topic. I do hope with the summary of the 3 documents and the summary of those 3 DNV, the operational guide, and the one from Namur that I referred to, that will help you in the future to do your security risk assessment. I do see, Mauro, we have one more before we can start to summarize. Right, yes. And the question is, which security level is associated with the following description? Which of the SLs that we show here, SL 1, 2, 3, or 4, security level 1, 2, 3, 4, will define protection against intentional violation using simple means with low resources, generic skills, and low motivation?
Couple of click again, and then
yeah, we there. We have our target. My minimum target is achieved. You can share it, Mauro.
Yes, I stop it. I share it.
Seems that after the first poll to the second poll, people are starting to follow a little bit more careful because they are afraid to get a question that they cannot answer. So yes, indeed, the majority has it correct. This is the SL2, which I already mind you. And I just did this just to open your mind. If you believe that your safety instrumented system today, the one that you all are using, has been designed to be protected against intentional violation, well, then you're wrong. That means no matter which system you use today, any intentional violation, even with simple means, can already jeopardize your security achievement of that type of system. And that should ring a bell to think about. What you may not have known before is clearly an issue that you should start to take care of. All right, Mauro, I will stop sharing this and I will summarize. Managing cybersecurity. Well, again, Stephen Smith was giving this in one of the joint presentations we have done a couple of years ago. And actually, this is a bad news for all the, let's say, vendors of cybersecurity material and countermeasurements that you may have paid some money for. If you think technology can solve security problems, well, then clearly you don't understand the problems, and also you do not understand your technology yet. So in other words, don't believe that any security level that you have been buying cannot be actually jeopardized by anyone with some intentional violation. Right, we do support you with services and also with training. This is all the service on the lifecycle support. And we do have here on the bottom some, let's say, limited lifecycle support for the 62443. The reason why I say limited is because the demand is too much and the available persons are too less. So we all struggle with the same kind of problems that we cannot immediately help you. There is some waiting line for the moment enabled to help you with this type of services. We do actually do some TOV Rhineland accredited competency review programs on cybersecurity. We have the fundamental course. It can be both as well as online virtually, but as the corona seems to be a forgotten issue, they all talk about the Russian war, but corona is gone for the moment with most of the countries we are visiting. Well, we do have face-to-face actually training, and we do have some virtual training available, both on security risk assessment and on the fundamental. Last but not least, we do have the famous book in the industry, more than 50,000 copies being distributed. There is nothing in there for the moment on cybersecurity. That may be an idea for a future edition for GMI. I will stop sharing this, Mauro, and I will give you again the full command for the Q&A, because we did collect some questions and answers, or sorry, some questions I have to do the answers. But we did collect some questions in the registrations, and I have prepared the file. If you don't find it, Mauro, I have it here available.
Okay, I have it available. I can open it, no problem. Have a look to the questions. We have a question from a gentleman, and in the meantime, I will open the.
Okay, what are the security levels of a BPCS control system controller and of a SIS available from different manufacturers? Well, I cannot give you vendor-related data, of course. I can only give you the following comment. The ones that I have seen so far are the SIS vendors, the major vendors. They all go up to maximum security level 1, which in my first impression, opinion, was a kind of a shock. Personally, I would have expected they would have been able to go to security level 2, but for some reasons the SIS vendors have not. I cannot give you a clear, let's say, vision, answer or statement on the BPCS for the simple reasons I don't follow those type of systems, as I'm clearly an SIS engineer and not a BPCS engineer anymore. Right, Mauro, go ahead.
Okay, you should see the presentation. Am I correct?
You do? Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the few questions. This is the first. Will you read it, or what you want me to read it?
I will read it, Mauro, if you allow me. How can, because then I will maybe remember the question myself.
Yes,
how can
yes.
engineer ensure ICS cybersecurity for project from the beginning? Okay. All right. Next one. Next slide, please. The answer. All right. Well, I hope that this person, I cannot remember the person's name. Can you go back one slide, Mauro? Okay. I hope that the person had followed or has followed here today this webinar, because clearly the intention of the webinar, end of the day, is to try to help the people. And how you start, I would recommend to follow the operational guide or the DNV guide as a start, as it is a free of charge document. Read it, try to understand it. And if you still struggle, then I would advise you to try to follow an initial training, or there are many different webinars available on the internet today. All right, Mauro, thank you.
Let me try. Oh, here it is.
Safety and security. Is there any connection to the 62443? I think I have answered that, but I left the question in there because I liked that question on the pre-registration of the webinar. The short answer, of course, is yes, because I have shown you the 62443 and also the importance. And as already mentioned, it is to my opinion today that the 62443 is becoming more and more and more recognized for the very simple reason you cannot use an IT security standard enabled to do your, let's say, installation in the field for the process industry. Because if you would only use the IT security standard, there will be no match or no much matching towards your industrial installation, the one you are using today to control and to produce your production in your process industry. So the ICS itself, the technologies used today are typically the central heart of your most critical infrastructure enabled to produce your production. All right, Mauro?
Yeah.
There's one more, I think, by memory.
Yes, this is the second last question. I have a question for them.
Which standard needs to be followed to meet security requirement in the 6.15.11? Okay, again, we have answered that. You have to remember that the IEC 6.15.11 is not a directive. It is not a law. It is seen as a good engineering practice. Therefore, if you open the standard, there are 3 parts, part 1, 2, and 3. Part 1 is the only part which is the normative section. So if you do have a project where, for instance, the client is requiring to comply to 6.15.11, well, then clearly you have to comply to the minimum normative requirements, which is part 1. And in that same part 1, in chapter 8, which was your phase number 1, in your process hazard risk assessment, you are clearly demanded to, by the standard, saying you shall carry out a security risk assessment. And that is what I was trying to highlight here in this webinar. The standard is saying you shall do it. and it gave you 3 references, which is the report 9 from the ISA 84, which is the 27,000 series, which is the IT management security of your system, and it is the 62443, which we have seen in the webinar here today. Yes, Mauro?
Okay, now I have this question I want to launch and to get feedback. Yeah, we would like to know your feedback about the content of the webinar we have done. You will see later also our email address. If you have any recommendation for future webinars, you just drop me an email. We will collect your feedback and try to arrange kind of webinar that you're looking for. That's all for the moment. I stop. So it looks like Tino, you have done a great job again. Not surprised. Let me check if there is another question. Yeah, there is another question. You may have a look.
Question. It's a recommendation from a participant saying, I think you need to add the NIST 882 also, which is also free of charge. Well, if this is free of charge, of course, we need to have a look to that. I have to apologize if my list was not complete. As I said, there are so many documents for the moment there, but thank you for the tip. I will certainly take it into consideration for the next future webinars. Thank you for that.
Okay, so we are almost at the end. So we are almost at the end. Yes. Again, just a few words again, just to say, to repeat what I was saying in the beginning. My recommendation first is to go to our website and to check and to monitor, because we are going to provide different kind of webinars also in future on different topics, which are our specialties, intrinsic safety, functional safety, or security, as well as specific application of our product. So go visit the web and check out for any further interesting webinar you're looking for. And again, you will receive this presentation in PDF format. And again, you will have the chance to visit the YouTube channel, and you can go through the several webinars which we have done in the past and we will do in the future. The rest, see you to the next webinar. Thank you very much for your participation. And again, see you next time.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you, everyone.